Thanks for stopping by. I'm glad you're here. Why not relax and listen to a story or two? It's a story of our vagabond's life, from getting a wheelie house to renovating it to trying to get legal to finally getting on the road a little bit. Last time I was talking about how our wheelie house got in the shop and was stuck there for nearly a year. Well, someone tried to fix the roof. In the meantime, I thought I'd do some research and try and understand a little bit more about RVs. How do they work? What's inside the coach? And what should be there? The last time I was in a motorhome was just after I'd gotten my driver's license. Our family took a trip for a couple weeks, and that was it. Surely things have changed between those days and today. So I started poking around. I used YouTube to get some idea of what's going on. I ran across the tiny house movement, and there's a bunch of videos there showing different techniques of building a tiny little house on an old flatbed trailer. But some of those ideas are good ideas. They would probably help out in our wheelie house. Should it ever happen that Wendy and I will actually get to RV full time, we'll probably be in many different kinds of weather, from hot and sticky to cold and frozen. During those times, we'll probably want to stay inside the RV. It'll probably be a place where we'll cook, and there's a lot of humidity that comes off of cooking and us breathing, and there's certain questions about air purity and so forth. So wouldn't it be nice if there was a magic machine that would change the outside air for the inside air, but keep the inside temperature the same? Well, as it turns out, there is such a device, an air-to-air exchanger, and you can buy one of those, and they are very costly, and they weigh a lot of pounds. That's two things I didn't want. I want something cheap and something light. I almost gave the idea over, but then I ran across a site on YouTube, not on YouTube, on the net, that showed how to make such a device using some sort of corrugated plastic. Well, the trade name for this is Coroplast, and sure enough, you could buy a 4x8 sheet of this corrugated plastic for a few dollars, or at least whenever I did this, you could buy it for a few dollars. It looked like it would be more or less straightforward to make one of these air-to-air exchangers out of this corrugated plastic stuff, so I thought, I'll try it. I glued most everything together with caulk, used a few fasteners here and there, some tin for the ductwork, and a cheap little voltage regulator. I'll tell more about the voltage regulator in a minute. It took me a couple of months to build this thing. The first part was to make the core. The core is where all the magic happens. It's actually quite easy to make. You can use a pair of shears, cut up the corrugated plastic into squares. I used about 1 foot by 1 foot, and stack them together. I glued them together with the caulk, put one corrugation going one direction, the next corrugation going the other direction, so forth and so on, to make a little cube. I tried to make it just right whenever I did the cutting of the squares, but of course that's kind of something that's not going to work. You're not going to get it to all line up. The trick is to make the squares a little oversized, and then once the cube is finished, trim it off. And the trick for trimming it off is to use an old hand plane. I got one from either my grandfather or my great-grandfather. It was kind of rusty, but I cleaned out the rust, sharpened up the blade, and since you're working with this plastic, this stuff is not very tough at all. It's easy to shave things off and get your cube really nice. Easy enough to do. To make a air-to-air exchanger, you really need a couple of fans. Wendy found a couple of cast-off fans where she works. They were powered by 2 D batteries. Well, the Wheelie House is set up for 12 volts. Not, let's see, what would that be? 3 volts for 2 D batteries. So that's where the DC to DC variable voltage regulator comes into play. I got rid of all of that double D business and just pulled out the batteries, put them in place, hooked them up, and then hooked them up to the output side of the variable voltage regulator. And I just started turning up the voltage. Listened to the fans start to run. They ran faster and faster, and pretty soon I could increase the voltage and the fans didn't change speed at all. I figured that was where I should quit adjusting the voltage and just let it be, and so I called it good. Of course, it's necessary to put in some ductwork when you have this air-to-air exchanger. There's 4 ducts that are in play, 2 for the inside air and 2 for the outside air. It's easy enough to put it in place. I got some vents for the outside and put them in and hooked everything up just using dryer vent material. But does it work after all that fooling around? Well, actually, it does. It's not amazingly efficient. During a Michigan winter, nice and cold, I ran it and checked the difference in temperature and so forth to see what was going on. It works. It's not wonderful, but it does what it needs to do. It will help the humidity, and it keeps the heat loss or gain, depending on if you're cooling or heating, bearable. Would I do it again? Harder question. Well, the air-to-air exchanger does work. It's more or less easy to make. And of course, if I had to make another one, I would be practiced at it and much more efficient. Does it really help on those really hot, humid days? Yeah, it helps. I can do some further testing on it, but I'm just not sure it's worth it. It might be, it might not be. I'll have to wait and see. Well, the air-to-air exchanger at least kept me busy during that year where the RV, the Wheelie House, was imprisoned in that Elkhart, Indiana shop. Finally, I managed to break out the Wheelie House and get it back to our apartment. At our apartment, which is like an old mansion, there are a number of garages, and I could use one of those as a shop. And fortunately, the grounds had enough room to park the Wheelie House. So I guess I was ready to go. I had a place to shop and something to work on. I'll have to check over the RV and see what kind of a fine mess the shop left me. But that's another story.